Hey, this is Rick for Community Creating Community Spaces so you can get up with others and also with God. So, kind of, sad, upsetting, disruptive news that my wife recently got laid off. So she's doing the whole job searching thing, and I'm looking at the budget, seeing where we can kind of make some cuts to make things work. And as I'm reading the Proverbs, this proverb that I'm able to share in the video today, it just jumps out to me. It sticks with me. And this is sitting with me right now a little differently than it sits with me when I read it, when both of us are employed and have a job. So I wanted to run this by you to see if it generated any discussion. In this video, I have some thoughts around income, what kind of lifestyle is really fulfilling, and how much money is actually enough to feel good. Video is based on my interpretation of Proverbs, chapter 30, verses 7 through 8. Oh God, I beg two favors from you. Let me have them before I die. First, help me never to tell a lie. And second, give me neither poverty nor riches. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs. For if I grow rich, I may deny you and say, who is the Lord? And if I am too poor, I may steal and thus insult God's holy name. Here's the direction I'm taking to this video. I want to explore the question, how much is enough to live a fulfilling life? I mean, is there an upper limit that when we reach this amount, we want to stop? Because if there's anything past, if we get anything past this amount, it will sort of not be good for us. That it'll have a negative impact on us if we earn too much. That's the question I want to explore, because I think that's what the text is really referring to. One of the courses I took in my grad degree included a focus on low SES, low socioeconomic status. So if you're broke and you can't get unbroke, people who have less money behave differently than people with a lot of money. You don't see me driving a Lamborghini. You'll see other people driving a Lamborghini if they have the money to afford it, but not me. People who have less money live differently, behave differently than people who have a lot of money. For the purpose of my degree, we were just looking at what we needed to know to show up the way our clients needed us to show up for them if they were struggling with their finances. And what we discovered is apparently there is a sweet spot. So I'm actually going to share with you just briefly, not just theory, but actually research on this. When someone has enough to pay their bills, so a place to live, food, transportation, clothes, taking care of the kids, and then on top of that, they can have a couple of toys, maybe like a bike, a boat. You can go on a cruise, maybe. That's the sweet spot. Enough to live on and just a little extra for some toys or some playtime. That is the sweet spot. Once you go over that sweet spot, money's effect on happiness and a sense of fulfillment actually drops off. It starts to diminish. As money goes up, so does responsibility, and so does loss of freedom and the feeling of the weight of stress and lack of friends, less time for family, lower quality relationships. After the sweet spot, money no longer does for us what we want it to. And to get those happy feelings, we actually need to make quite a bit more money. It exponentially increases when we get to those higher levels of the earning thing. Dave Ramsey said it this way: when you eat a lot of lobster, it eventually starts tasting like soap. There's a sweet spot for money. It's not on the low end and it's not on the high end. It's somewhere in the middle. That's basically what this proverb is saying. I think there's a sweet spot for money. But the focus on this isn't on money's effect on our feelings of fulfillment and happiness. It's the focus on money's effect on our connection with God. They've got 2 points around this idea, how money can affect our connection with God. And if we're prioritizing our connection with God, then is there something we need to be thinking about in terms of our money? That is there actually an upper limit that we need to be aware of? So here's my first point. 2 points in this. Here's my first point. Too much and too little both become spiritual challenges. I'm not going to say bad or good. I'm going to say spiritual challenges. The text says, for if I grow rich, I may deny you and say, who is the Lord? And if I am poor, I may steal and thus insult God's name. Now, isn't this interesting? In churches, I've occasionally heard messages around God favoring the poor over the rich. I've heard the talk that God has a soft spot for people without money. I mean, in a way that means he's kind of callous toward people who have money. It's sort of a poor people against rich people, and rich people have to be the bad guys for some reason. I don't think that's true. I think God's got a soft spot for all of us, regardless of money. But here, it's actually pretty clear that being poor doesn't mean it's easier to connect with God. It means we often have more challenges to our values, and it's hard to keep our values as Jesus followers. Both ends of the spectrum, either the high end or the low end, have challenges in terms of our Jesus following. Neither one is better than the other in terms of us trying to be a Jesus follower. I spent some time working in Ottawa as a pastor, and I happened to be working in an area where there was a lot of money. And it was strange for me, and it was culture shock for me because I grew up low SES. I went from low SES in Scarborough to a high SES area in Ottawa. So in Scarborough, if I wanted people to come to my church events, they had to be free because nobody could afford anything really. In Ottawa, if I wanted people to come to my events, they had to cost big amounts of money. Otherwise, they had no value. I discovered that something for the very first time while I was in Ottawa. I had never had the chance to interact with people who had a lot of money before I went to Ottawa, and so this kind of blew my mind a little bit. I discovered that no one was taking time to intentionally reject God. I mean, they weren't using their money to in some way declare war against God and all the poor Christians and all the poor people. I mean, it's pretty silly to hear myself say that now, but this was new to me because I grew up low SES and I ministered in low SES areas. Um, I discovered that where there's money and the responsibility that comes with it, God just isn't on the top 10 list. There's just no room to think about him because life is pretty full, loaded with responsibilities, and you're just barely keeping up with the next breath because sometimes you can be so tired. When life's going well, we tend to be less interested in thinking about God. So that seems to be the point of this proverb. At some point, a point is reached where we simply stop trying to connect with God and we forget who he is. There's the challenge around the upper limit of money. Or on the other side, we are so aware of our earthly needs that our values are challenged and we end up living a life that's not compatible with the calling to love God and love others. So there's a challenge. At some point, we'll have so much money that we'll focusing on God, or at some point we'll have so little money that we'll begin to live in ways that don't honor God and don't honor the people around us. There's a challenge. So because the danger on either side of the spectrum, we find this prayer in this proverb. And I'm going to title it like this: Aim for the humble sweet spot is how I'm setting this up. The text says, second, give me neither poverty nor riches. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs. What I learned in my low SES course, I see in this verse, there is actually a sweet spot regarding our income, not just for lifestyle, but also for spirituality, also for our us as Jesus followers. If we can meet our basic needs and have just a little extra to have some toys, be able to play, that's a really good place to be in. Not only does research show us that people are far more happier in that zone, but the Bible is also saying we're spiritually better off. Well, that's the point that the proverb is making, and I'm just wondering if you're interpreting it different than me. I know a few Christians with a lot of money, and I wouldn't say their faith is in question. The proverb is generally true, but it's not true about everyone. It makes me wonder, should we be intentional about limiting the amount of income we'll strive for? I mean, it just sounds silly. To be wise, should we discern this is the upper limit and I won't go beyond it? I mean, personally, I think so. I have no idea what it is, but I think at some point there might be an upper limit to say, okay, enough is enough. This is really changing how I value myself as a human being, distancing me from humanity, making me weird. So maybe I've reached my upper limit. So I'll make a suggestion about how to think about this. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on the proverb when we meet or in the comments below. as we look at this, I think the focus is more on prioritizing God, not really on the money at all. I wonder if living a values-driven life, namely a life that values being a Jesus follower, I wonder if that's all the financial limitation that we need, sort of the GPS, the radar, the compass that we need. Being a Jesus follower compels us to adopt a good work ethic, and it also leads us to love God and love others. When our level of income, suddenly leads us to no longer having a good work ethic and brings us to a lifestyle where we're no longer loving God and loving others, I think for us, that would be an indication that that would be our personal limit. It's different for everybody. I think that at some point we reach a place where we can no longer handle the money because we don't have the training for it, the education, whatever, the experience of it. I think at some point when we reach a certain level of income, it throws us off our game. And we then are challenged to try to figure out how to love God and how to love others. What do you think, though? Is there a sweet spot of income for you? What does that sweet spot look like for you? What does life look like for you when you're in that sweet spot? Like, try to figure out what's your lifestyle like, and what does your Jesus following look like in that financial sweet spot? I kind of giggle a little bit because I'm sure my kids never want me to reach that upper limit, and so that I can continue to fund their lives. I'm looking forward to reading your comments and discussing them on Sunday. By the way, men, come join the conversation Sunday at 6 p.m. Ask for the Zoom link, please. You can find the link to reach us on Facebook, or you can leave a post right here. Love to connect. So that's it from me to you for now. Would you please like? Would you please share? Would you please subscribe? Would you please ask for the link? 6 o'clock, Sunday, men only, for community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. I'll see you next time.